Okay, evaluating algebraic expressions. So if you've already watched the other video about simplifying, this is completely different. They're both expressions, which means they don't have an equals with something on the other side. So they're not an equation. They're just an expression. So this is basically just order of operations with substituting numbers in for letters. So you're going to start with letters, but you're going to end with just numbers. So about the simplest I can make it would be something like this, 4 plus n. Now, if you were simplifying, there'd be nothing you could do, but we're not simplifying, we're evaluating, which means we're going to get a number as an answer. So let's say they told you that n was 5, and they have to tell you what n was 5 is 5, otherwise you can't evaluate expressions. So you basically just take the number they give you, plug it in for the letter that they have, rewrite the problem, and then solve. So of course they're not going to be this easy on the test. We'll build up to the more difficult ones. So you might have something like this, and for now I'm just going to leave n as being 5 to make it less complicated. So if you have something like this, a number next to a letter, it means multiplication. So anytime you've got something next to it, it's always a good idea to put whatever you're substituting in parentheses. And we could have put this in parentheses up here, it wouldn't have changed anything, but that was pretty simple problem, so I didn't add the parentheses. Here you really need to start adding it, because once you start adding exponents and you don't put parentheses in, it can change the answer to the problem. So the expression looks like this once you substitute 5 in for n. Pemdas, in case you don't know, P-E-M-D-A-S. Some people say, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally to remember it. Stands for parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So multiply and divide come before adding and subtracting. So we multiply the 2 times the 5. Anytime you have a number next to a parentheses, that means multiply. Of course, we already talked about it being multiplication up here. So you just have 10, bring down your plus 3, and then add those together. That's it. You can put in division. Let's say you had 20 over n. Well, you just substitute in your 5 for your n, and then solve. So it'd be 4. And you can put all this together. Oops, didn't mean to do that, but you know what it's going to be now. So you could have multiple n's. You would just substitute your 5, still haven't changed that, in for all of your n's. So you'd have 3 parentheses 5 minus 6 plus 25 over. You can put this in parentheses, but it really doesn't do anything when it's by itself. So we do our multiplication and our division first. So 3 times 5 is 15, minus 6. 25 divided by 5 is 5. Now, this is where PEMDAS can lead you astray. So if you simply think that you follow this to the letter from P to S, then you would think that you do all your adding before you do any of your subtracting. You can do your adding before you're subtracting, but you have to know what you're doing. I tell people that the safest thing to do is to work adding, subtracting from left to right. Now, multiplying and dividing we haven't hit yet. That one you have to work left to right. So it's just a good idea to get that in a habit. If you just work everything left to right, multiplying and dividing first and then adding and subtracting, then you're going to get your more problems correct. So down here, some people will try to take a shortcut and they'll say, I'm just going to look over here on this side. I'm going to do my addition first and say 6 plus 5 is an 11. 15 minus 11 is 4, and you'd be getting it incorrect because you're treating this like it's a positive 6 when really you have to look at the minus in front of it. It's a negative 6. So it's easier just to work it left to right. 15 minus 6 is 9. 9 plus 5 is 14, and then you've got the correct answer. So you can have multiple letters or variables in a problem. For example, that. They're going to tell you what x is, and they're going to tell you what y is. And these can be negatives. We'll do some negatives in a minute. So you just rewrite your problem, parentheses, find your x, subtract 4, parentheses, find your y. Do your multiplication first. I wasn't expecting that. Just made that up on the fly, but sometimes your answers are going to be 0. So we can mix some division in there. You rewrite your problem 15 over 3 plus 16 over 2. Do your division. So you have 5 plus 8, and that's going to be 13. Now you can also have squares and cubes and so forth. Here I go writing the numbers again. So let's say we had that. If you've watched my video on roots and squares, you know how to work these. But if you don't, an exponent means how many times you're multiplying this number. Well, let's just rewrite it first. So let's plug our 3 in. And this is where you really need to get in the habit of putting them in parentheses, because once you move on to negative numbers, and if you have a calculator and you plug it in the calculator, you're going to get it wrong if it's not in parentheses. Okay, so back to the exponents. This does not mean 2 times 3, and this does not mean 3 times 2. Exponents mean how many times you're multiplying this number by itself. So this means that you're multiplying a 3 twice, like that. This means you're multiplying a 2 3 times. Bring our plus down. So if you don't have a calculator, you have to do this out by hand. 3 times 3 is 9. Now don't get in a hurry and think this is 6. This is not 6, just because you have 3 2's. What you're thinking is 3 2's added together is 6. So this is multiplying. So 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2 is going to be 8. 9 plus 8, 17, and you're done. You can have numbers in front of variables. Let's change that to, we'll change that to squared and leave that just x. So plug in your numbers, which is 3, 2. Now Pemdas tells you to exponents first. So if you multiply your 5 times 3 first, you're going to get it way too high. So the first thing you got to do is 3 squared. So 3 times 3 comes first, which is 9. So 9 times 5, and you can leave it in parentheses if you want, minus 2 times 2. 9 times 5 is 45, minus 2 times 2, which is 4. Your answer is 41. You can have multiple letters beside each other. So let's say we have a C equals -3. Do some negatives. E equals 4. F equals 7. Say we had C squared E plus F. So the only number in there is a exponent. So you start by plugging in your numbers. So C is -3. If you don't put it in parentheses and you plug it in the calculator, it will be wrong. The reason why is because the parentheses tells you you're squaring the negative and the 3. If you just put minus or -3 squared, the calculator is only going to square the 3, and it's just going to bring the negative down. So you're going to have a negative instead of a positive. Now we plug in for E, which is 4, plus F, which is 7. Now those parentheses aren't going to do anything, so it doesn't matter if you put those there or not. These you need over here. So -3 squared is -3 times -3. So -3 times -3 is +9 times 4 is going to be +36 plus 7 is going to be 43. So what I did there is I did exponents first till I was done. Then I did multiplying. Then I did addition. You can have multiple things inside the parentheses. Keep wanting to write the numbers. So you could have something like that, and that is an E, not a C. Step 1, plug all your numbers in. So C is -3. F is 7. E is 4. Those don't really need parentheses, but you can put parentheses around each of those if you want. Don't forget your cubed. Okay, so step 1 is plug in all your numbers for your letters. Step 2 is follow Pemdas. Pemdas tells me to do what's inside the parentheses first. So the first thing I got to do is 7 minus 4, which is 3. I'm going to leave that in parentheses just because I have a cubed touching the outside of the parentheses. Bring everything down that wasn't an exponent. Now we do our exponents. So 3 cubed. Well, you can do that out to the side. 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. So that ends up being 27. Now, if you want, it's not going to hurt anything to go ahead and multiply that all in the same step. But if you want to keep it one step at a time, you can bring that down. So 4 times -3 is -12. It's 27 minus 10. Now, here's where you have a little bit of leeway in how you solve this. I said it's a good habit to work it left to right. In this case, I personally would work this a different way. If you want to continue to work this left to right, that's fine. What I do is I combine like terms, or I combine like signs, is what I should have said. So you've got a -12 here and a -10 here. I know my integer rules, which tells me that two negatives can be added together. So if I bring my 27 down and I add my 12 and my 10, I get 22, but that's -22. Then you can solve it like that, which gives you 5. Now if you did it left to right, you'd have -12 plus 27, which is going to end up being 15. And then you'd have 15 minus 10, which is still going to be 5. So either way, whichever way is easiest for you to do, but that way is easier for a lot of people. So we're going to try a few of the worksheets. So number 1 says y divided by 2 plus x. Sometimes they're going to have a division symbol, sometimes it's going to be in a fraction. They're both the same thing. So y is 2, so let's plug a 2 in right there. We're going to divide it by 2 plus x, which is 1. So your division is first. 2 divided by 2 is 1 plus 1. So your answer is 2. Let's do one a little bit more difficult. Let's do this one right here. So z parentheses x plus y parentheses. Z is 6 parentheses. X is actually 6 too. That's weird. Plus y, which is 8. So there's your problem. Parentheses first. 6 plus 8 is 14 times 6. And I know you'll have to work that out to the side, but it is 88, I think. Oh, I misspoke. Always double check your answer. 84. Yep, it's 84. Let's do this one because it's got a squared in it. So they've got p squared, which is 7, times m, which is 4, divided by 4. So first things first is exponents. 7 squared, you just do 7 times 7. You can write that out, or you can just know that. Multiplied by 4, divided by 4. Now here's one of those things that if you think you're making yourself a shortcut by doing 4 divided by 4 first, you're going to get it wrong. You've got to do the leftmost first. So 4 times 49 is going to be, you'll probably need to do that to the side or have a calculator. 199, I think. Now, since I know how multiplication and division works, I know if you take a number and you multiply it by 4 and then you divide it by 4, you just end up with the same number again. So since 4 times 49 is 199, then 199 divided by 4 is just going to be 49. Now, I think that's one of those really strange occurrences where if you would have worked this out incorrectly, which means you'd have done 4 divided by 4, you still would have ended up with the right answer. That can happen sometimes. Don't think that you're necessarily working it quicker, because if this would have been a different number, it may have come out differently than it did. So that's got 2 pages. All the answers are on the second page. And there's another worksheet that's almost the same thing. N squared is 8 minus m, which is 7. 8 times 8 is 64. Minus 7 is 54. Let's just do this one for fun. Z is 19. You don't really need parentheses. Plus x, which is 1 cubed. Now, in case you don't know it, anytime you have a 1 raised to an exponent that's a whole number, positive whole number, your answer is just going to be 1, because you're basically saying 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. And you can add as many as you want. You can have 1 to the 10th power. It's still going to be 1. The only time that changes is when that's a negative, which you don't have to deal with on the GED, or when that's a fraction, which you also don't have to deal with on the GED. You will in college algebra. So it's just 19 plus 1, which is 20. So again, work through that. There's 2 pages. I'm going to do one on the second page because it's pretty complicated. Let's do number 23 because it has nested parentheses. Nested parentheses are just telling you that you need to do the innermost parentheses before you do the second set of parentheses before you do what's on the outside of the parentheses. So x is 9 minus parentheses 9 minus parentheses 9 minus 1 cubed is on the inside, parentheses, parentheses. So the first thing you do, remember this cubed isn't on the outside, so you got to cube first. And I just told you from that previous problem that 1 raised to any whole number is going to be 1. So actually you can just go ahead and say 9 minus 1 is going to be 8. Now don't forget what you're bringing down and what you're not. So we didn't touch these, so they come down. We got rid of this inner parentheses, but we did not get rid of this outer parentheses, so that comes down. So now you've got 9 minus 8, which is 1. So it just ends up being 9 minus 1, which is 8. That is the end of evaluating algebraic expressions.